How did you end up in artificial intelligence? How a designer, an artist ended up looking into artificial intelligence?
A lot of people say, it's either the artificial intelligence finds you or you find artificial intelligence. In this case, artificial intelligence found me. As you already know, I am a principal product designer for the Artificial Intelligence Center of Excellence here at Intralinks. And so as part of the Center of Excellence, what we do is we create user-centered design deliverables, but also processes for product integration with any product or any capability that we have here at Intralinks.
What type of challenges that situation poses to the design?
It becomes a check for an enterprise, right? So in order to be able to pivot, in order to be able to adapt like this, your fundamental design processes will need to be much more rigorous than you've had before. That means that there's very little room, or there's less room for error along the way, because what you don't want to have happen is change the interface from one evolution to another. You need to ensure that in your design, you can modularly evolve your design as needed, but it still reads the same to the user. And in order to achieve that, you have to think much more modularly than you had before.
What type of inputs do you need to have that you didn't need to have before? And what type of other professionals inside the organization you have to interact for achieving a good results in AI?
So you need to be much more rigorous with having a better component library than you did before. And your approach to the design needs to be much more, I hesitate to use the word because this is an industry term, but it's you need to be much more atomic in your design, meaning you have to think of pieces like Lego pieces that you can put together and take apart, but it still holds together.
What do you have seen that has changed in the design specifically to respond to this technology evolution, and what do you anticipate it's going to change when we're gonna move from narrow intelligence to a broader artificial intelligence?
I think the biggest changes that you're going to see is much more deliberate control of voice and tone in order to mitigate a user's reaction to failure. It's interesting, we're much more forgiving of failures when it comes to things that we think are not as accountable, or we don't attribute accountability to. For example, if somebody my age comes to me and accidentally spills a drink on me, I'm going to be very upset. But if the voice and tone is someone like, my grandmother or someone, and they spill a drink on you and they come at you with that tone, you don't necessarily see it as failure. So bring this back to AI. I think what you'll see is a much more conscious effort to represent a very deliberate voice and tone and a person behind it in order to help you or help the user be a part of training the system.
Where do you think design is going, and what type of challenges are happening? Is the voice and tonality the most important thing in that area, or are there additional design considerations that will result in better user experiences, if you like?
I think some of the other pieces that you're going to see is the context, or awareness of the context around the user. It's almost less about the user and more about understanding how the user feels in relation to where they are at the moment. So for example, if I were to create a scheduling app, a smart scheduling app that works with you to schedule, your next appointment, it's a very different experience if, you were doing this in your living room and you're just, you're calm and you're relaxed on your couch and you're scheduling some, maybe some appointment, versus if I were in line at my dentist's office and there's 10 people behind me, and they're all rushing and I've got to go back to work. I don't want a slow experience, but I feel as if a very successful AI would adapt to where I am and understand what to ask, when to ask it, and why they're asking it.
I like to pick your mind on where we're going when we consider the future, not only the voice assistance, but also the visual element of human machine interaction.
There's going to be a lot more opportunities to build much more effective experiences for people. Let's think about an artificial representation of a human, or there's a lot of applications for something like that. If it were something to help someone learn and understand and have conversations with people of different cultures, being able to understand what the person really means, or what it would mean based on if they were in this culture or that culture. For instance, smiling might not be a good thing in one culture, whereas another culture, or in one culture it might look very devious, whereas another culture smiling might be something that's very comforting. So making people very aware of what was intended would be very important. I think also, when you're speaking of trauma, it's interesting, right? I've heard of there would be soldiers that have difficulty coming back. They're having difficulties because, they don't know, they might be in such a high pressure situation where showing emotion is just not a priority. How might that experience of speaking with a system or, an artificial intelligence where it slowly starts introducing facial expressions and understands and maybe exaggerates these, maybe responds to how the user's face is, how the user's is interacting with the system. I think the possibilities are that the user can explore more with their emotional range than they could with a person. So it really depends on the context and what goals you're trying to get out of the experience.